First of all, thank you very much for coming out in this miserable cold weather. We're pleased to have with us today Marilee Salvator, the artist who created the work in this exhibition. She was not able to come in person because she just had surgery. Marilee Salvador's work is an exploration of the symbiotic relationship between materials and the natural world, and her use of organic shapes and organic materials like coastal paper and walnut ink are meant to draw attention to sort of the environmental impact we have. Marilee is an associate professor at Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green. She holds a BFA from Illinois State University and MFA from the University of New Mexico. Her work has been presented in over 30 solo exhibitions and over 140 group exhibitions in North America, Europe, Asia, and New Zealand. It is in numerous public collections, including the Smithsonian, the GCI University in Jingdozhou, China, and the Sakami Art Museum in Okinawa Prefecture, Japan. And she has completed a long series of residencies, including residence in Atelier Silex and Trois-Rivières, Quebec, St. Ceramics Institute in Jingdozhou, China, the Rare Foundation's historic Lorenzo Studios in Roswell, New Mexico, the Wild Art Sci in Charleston, Mexico, and the Aramont School of Arts and Crafts. She's also received a number of grants, including from South Arts and the Great Meadows Foundation. So please welcome Marilee Salvator.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. And I want to thank Michaela for all of her hard work on this exhibition, her amazing curation and installation of the work. I want to thank you all for being here, especially since it's so cold there. Geez, I hope that you're bundled up. And I want to thank Delta State University in general for having this opportunity to show my work there. I really wish that I was there with you in person. It's a huge honor to have my work there. I also wanted to say that myself and my colleagues, as well as our students here in Kentucky, are standing in support of you as you enter into this last semester at your university. I am an artist who works within printmaking, installation, and sculpture. The work is all driven by my intuition. It's a balance between intentionality and responsiveness. Sorry, I wanted to fix my timer there for a minute because I realized it was already on. So I'm really interested in the thematic parallels between resilience, identity, and transformation. This intuitive flow honors my connection with nature and reinforces the depth of my work, making each piece an expression of collaboration between myself and my environment. So this first print here is by John Cage. Often people know of Cage as being, a musical composer. However, he made a bunch of really amazing prints at a place called Crown Point Press in San Francisco. Cage's work, especially his embrace of chance and openness to unpredictable outcomes, shares a deep resonance for me and my work. Cage believed in putting emphasis on his action of his process. He would use chance operations to decide how to organize his compositions. Cage thought by using such methods, he could live out his own personality. He said chance, by helping to avoid habitual modes of thinking, could produce something fresher and more vital than that which a composer might invent alone. So this piece of mine goes way back to being a grad student. And the reason why I continue to keep this in my slideshow is because it was a very pivotal time for me. It's the first installation that I ever created, and it's the first time that I used the print as a form of modular growth. Since this point, I have used the print as a way to generate material so that I can create large-scale installations. And this particular piece was about the rain. I was going to school in New Mexico and it never rained. So I thought that it was really important to document it, how sacred it was. Okay, so this piece is from about 10 years ago. Again, another pivotal piece. It's about invasive plants. Specifically, I was really inspired by kudzu, and how it looks so beautiful and lush to someone who's not familiar with it, yet it has the ability to suffocate everything in its path. It is created with about 25 large sheets of linoleum that I carved into different patterns and then printed thousands of times onto a translucent film. It's the first time I then used the scissors as well as an X-Acto knife as a form of drawing tool to cut each piece into a different shape so that I could create this large scale piece. It's also the first time that I created an installation that I allowed to grow completely organically within the space. So this piece, Growth Patterns, is probably the piece that I am most well known for. It has over 1,000, mostly intaglio prints. There's a few archival pigment prints in there as well. I printed everything and then I mounted it onto pieces of wood and then I hand cut it out. And it is, the inspiration is cancer cells and how cancer has this ability to metastasize. And again, if you don't know what the cells are and you're looking at them, then they're actually quite beautiful to look at, yet at the same time, they're highly destructive. And that sort of that duality between beauty and destruction is something that's pretty common in my work for over, probably the last 10 or 15 years. This piece is by an artist named Celine Balki. Celine creates a synthetic world in which she observes living organisms' endless interactions, struggles, and conflicts across the picture plane, forming borders, divisions, and edges in the work. Mold, growth, metaphorically represents humans' actions and motives. I absolutely love this work. I feel like it's the ultimate in chance operations. The fact that the work is made by growing mold across the surface and how the artist completely allows the mold to take over and relinquishes her own control. It's the first time I started really thinking about how could I use nature as an active collaborator in my work. For some time, my work has been an examination of the natural world through the lenses of microbiology, searching for structural commonalities between invasive plants in the ecosystem and invasive diseases in the human body. And here are a few examples of some of the older prints exploring that subject matter. These are all around 22 by 30, and they include a variety of print media. This is an image of Cribula mutabus, which is a bryozoan colony. I was invited to participate in a printmaking portfolio project organized by another artist named April Flanders. The portfolio was on marine bioinvaders. And I was very interested in this project because of my history of working with other types of invasive species. When I started my research, I came across this image and I was really fascinated, by the way it looked visually, by the fact that it's an organism that's made of a modular structure, its level of translucency, And it's being quite beautiful, at least in my mind, and also invasive. The portfolio was sponsored by the Smithsonian Research Center, and the scientists there were very eager to put me in touch with two scientists who had been working quite a bit with Cribulum mutabus, and their names are Dr. Tom Trott and Matthew Dick. And they have been amazing to collaborate with, and they have shared so much information as well as imagery with me. So this is an image by Tom. Tom is a scientist in Maine, and Matt is a scientist in Japan. So this image here shows you a detail of how small Cribulum mutabus actually is. So each little red arrow on the photo is a whole colony. And those are on a piece of eelgrass, so they're very microscopic. After doing a wide variety of experimentation to figure out how I could use this imagery, this was the final piece that I created for the project. And it also is part of the Smithsonian Research Institute in Maryland and has been exhibited at an international conference on marine bioinvaders. So Cribulum mutabus is a colony of organisms that have to function together as a group in order to survive. And I was really fascinated by that aspect of them. So after that project, I decided I wanted to continue to explore it further. And so I decided that it would make sense for me to take the organism, this colony of organisms, and divide it to its individual parts, which one particular organism within the colony is called a zooid. And this was my first attempt of breaking it down, deconstructing it to the individual zooids, and then making a larger piece. So this is a wall shingle piece. So the same process as the installations that you have on the wall. Rhizoans intrigue me for their similarity to printmaking modules. Utilizing prints as a component to construct larger pieces, I explored the symbolic nature between zooids and printmaking. As my fascination for bryozoans evolved, Matt generously shared his research papers and asked me to look through them and find other organisms I might be interested in working with. He shared his whole entire database for each one that I was interested in, which I was completely blown away by. That's about the most generous thing ever for a scientist to do. So the image you're looking at here, the top two are the types of imagery he would share with me. So they use scan microscope images for them to be able to really look at the cellular structure. So those are the types of things I would receive, and they're also kind of smaller in resolution. So as a way to kind of figure out how I could use them, I decided I would start breaking them down to their individual zooids with the photos and working in Photoshop and recreating new zooids. So by deconstructing the photos of the organisms, I was thinking about how, and me constructing my own organisms about how this could provoke discussion of humanity's tendency to exert control over everything. We really like to control things, especially the natural world. So these are the type of imagery that I started creating, and they fit very well, with my sort of working process, which is very much about repetition. So I got great joy of spending hours and upon hours in Photoshop, just cutting and pasting little individual zooids to create larger bryozoan images. So I was turning those into photopolymer gravure images and printing them in the hopes that I would be able to utilize them in some way. I tend to always kind of work this way. I will come up with imagery and then I will create plates and print large quantities of them, allowing my intuition to guide me, in the hopes that they can be used for a future project and believing that I will find my way. So this was sort of the first kind of larger piece that I did with these prints I had been making. So I began thinking about how the transparent paper I had been using symbolizes Earth's resilience, reflecting its strength beneath a delicate appearance. The manipulation of the bryozoan imagery serves as a metaphor for humans' impact on nature, highlighting the fragility of our planet juxtaposed with its inherent strength. So when I'm not in the studio, I'm often out in nature, observing the cycle of life and how adaptive it is. I spent a lot of time, I had a sabbatical, I think it's 2 years ago now, for a year, and I spent a lot of my time out in New Mexico. I love the desert, so I would just wander around and seeing things like this, which is prickly pear that's sort of deteriorating and going to return back to the earth, is quite inspiring for me. My love of the desert deeply informs the themes and materials of my work, bringing an awareness of resilience, adaptation, and the beauty within harsh environments. The desert, the desert's landscape, often stark, sparse, and layered with geological and ecological history, mirrors the qualities I incorporate through my materials. The desert cycles of life, with plants adapting to conserve resources and withstand extremes, resonates with the ecofeminist aspects of my work, especially the interplay between vulnerability and strength. So this image is from an exhibition, a solo exhibition of Clarissa Towson that I saw in Denver. It's called Fallen from the Earth, and it explores the causes and effects of rising temperatures on Earth, memorializing a dying species of sycamore tree due to the effects of climate change. This is a silicone cast of the tree, which perished due to rising summer temperatures and lack of appropriate soil moisture. I was really blown away by the beauty of this piece, the way that it, honors this tree and also its use of translucency. And here's the rest of the tree. So she took a cast of the whole thing. It's a very powerful piece as a record. One of the residencies that I did during my sabbatical was in Roswell at the Rare Foundation. And I was very fortunate to be able to bring my studio assistant, Marilee Jones, with me for 2 weeks of that residency. And here she is pulling a print in their little printmaking shop there in Roswell. It's important for me to give her credit for all of her amazing printing assistance in a lot of the imagery that you'll see going forward. Each day, what we would do is we would get up and then we would go out in nature, go on a hike or just maybe a small walk, depending on the time we had. And I would collect materials that then we would take back to the studio where I would mix the colors from the earth and the plants that I would find for inspiration of the printing that day. And then Marilee and I would spend the day printing. So here's a couple of those pieces. We brought a lot of the gravure plates that I was making, and I had also started working with a glow forge and creating some plates as well. And these are all inspired by the bryozoan imagery that I had been working with. While there in New Mexico, I was continuously thinking about the importance of the sun. So I decided I would use it as a sort of form of collaboration. So what I did was I got tea bags and I put them outside uh, with some found rocks to weigh the paper down, and I would let it sit outside for about 12 hours, basically the whole entire time that there would be sunshine. Um, as the sun shifts and intensifies, a unique record of evaporation is recorded in the paper fibers. I am interested in how these reticulation patterns are created through the process and how this act embodies chance. So this would be actually the first thing I would do every morning, would be go out and put my paper in the yard. Each day I sort of got more and more paper out there. And then we'd go on the hikes. So at nighttime, I would go to the studio that they provided me, which was pretty amazing, a huge space. And so I started just playing around with these prints that we're making, trying to figure out how I was going to use them. I think it's very important, at least for my work, and I feel like actually for a lot of artists, to sort of trust your process, because I feel like we could sit all day or weeks even and try to plan and come up with the best idea to make the best work. But I personally find that the best way for me to create work is to actually just start making, and not worry too much about why I'm making or what I'm making. And then just sort of play and see what happens. That's where the ideas come up usually for me. This piece that you see here isn't very exciting to me, but there were certain things that I liked about it, so I continued to explore. After, a number of days playing around with all these different these piles of prints that we were creating in the studio, in the print shop, I came across this piece and I felt really excited about it. And I think it's very important to say that my work is certainly a collaboration between my materials and the natural world. So this was exhibited at Northern Illinois University. So right after that, I really wanted to take advantage of that space because I had, the walls were each like 20 foot wide. And it's unusual that I have that kind of space on the walls to be able to create. So I immediately took that piece down after I documented it and started a new piece. And this is what I ended up coming up with for the second piece. And I wrote this in relationship to the work. I set up processes to make the work more complicated. If something is too direct and straightforward, it becomes boring for me. And there's a large chance I'll end up messing it up because it's too immediate. I need time to process things, work through a series of steps. Each step builds upon one another. Things are slowly revealed, slowly brought to the surface. This new work is a series of meditations, and the records of these are layered, stacked, and some are almost completely submerged within the work. Others are closer to the surface. One could dig into the work and learn about this record of time. So here's a detail. So whenever I am too tired to be, doing all this labor of printing large quantities of things, I tend to sit in my studio and start cutting. Cutting paper is in my work functions as an essential transformative act. It works beyond the simple technical process to symbolize fragmentation, adaptation, and creation. Each cut I make is a deliberate alteration of the paper's natural state, much like natural forces shape landscapes over time. So when I went back to Kentucky after that residency, um, I was still working with the stains, but I happened upon this massive quantity of walnuts on my walk, and so I was like, well, I should make some walnut stain and see how that will work on my paper. So I cooked a bunch up in my Instapot and put them outside. I switched my tea bags out for cotton balls, and I dipped the cotton balls within the walnut and then would lay it on the paper again for as long as possible each day. making it a daily experience of, this became a sort of ritual for me. Um, whenever, as I was working with these, my original intention was to photograph them, and use those photographs in some of the plate making I had been doing. But I also started using the actual papers as well. So in Photoshop, what I began doing was taking those Rhizoan images that I had been using and then combining them with some of the stain images that I had also been creating. Um, and creating new images. At this point in time, I had purchased my own Glowforge, which was a very exciting development because I actually decided that the Glowforge created a lot better printing plates than the photogravure. The detail that I was able to get is pretty mind-blowing. So here's something that was just like in Photoshop. So I started making these laser engravings out of cast plexiglass. And I was really in love with the way that the plates look themselves. And I keep talking about how I'm going to use those as an installation at some point in time, and create just an installation with the plates. That hasn't happened yet, but it's in the back of my mind. There's always many projects in the back of my mind, but that's one of them. So here's just a couple of the plates that I think are actually super beautiful in the sun. So around this time, I was fortunate to be invited back to the Rare Foundation in Roswell for a second time to do another 2-month residency. While not in the studio again, I'm spending a lot of time out in nature. This is a place called Bottomless Lakes, which is right outside of Roswell. Just walking around, wandering. Walking is quite a meditation process for me. Taking in the small details and thinking about my relationship to my environment. So I knew when I came back this second time that I was going to be given a different studio. This studio, unfortunately, didn't have as amazing walls as the other one because there was a lot of windows. Yet at the same time, it had a lot of amazing windows. And I had a show coming up that I was going to create something that was a hanging type installation for. And also had actually similar windows behind it that would be in this space. So I decided I'd really focus on making hanging work when I got there. Right before the trip, I had been invited to be a visiting artist at Murray State University to spend a week working with their students and printing my imagery, which was really wonderful because, my big thing is creating mass amounts of prints that I can then make into installations. So having, like a whole group of students helping me print intaglio for a whole week was really exciting for me. When I got there, I had tons of paper that was printed. I probably brought like 30 or 40 24 by 36 sheets of this Tycoso paper that I really like. And so this was sort of the first kind of attempt at doing something with it. Um, it was way too dense. It really wasn't, doing what I wanted it to. But again, that act of creating and trying and experimenting and being curious is something that is essential to my working process. So I was just going to see what happened. And after a number of different tries at different ways of hanging, different combinations of pieces, this ended up being the piece that I created that I was really excited about. And it also happens to be in the show there. And I'm excited the way that it was hung there, which is a little bit different. So it's fun to see how it goes up in different locations. What I was really amazed by in this piece is the relationship between the sunlight and the actual pieces themselves. And New Mexico sun is like nothing else. It's so intense, and how it would shift throughout the day. And then how the relationship between the panes of the windows related to the panes of the paper that I had glued together. And here's just a detail, mainly just to show you my cute little petunia who wanted to be in the picture. Okay, so here is this. This is my second studio there in Roswell. So in addition to working on these hanging pieces, I was also starting to work on these circular panels. So the circular panels, I brought a bunch of blank maple panels. They're about 30 inches around or in diameter. And so I started working on those as well. So the circle panels ended up becoming a collage. So what I would do is glue down pieces of the the stains that I was creating in the yard, the actual stains, and then layer them with all of these different types of imagery I was creating from the Glowforge plates. And this paper that I'm using, this is a specific Kozo paper that's extremely thin and transparent. And when I would glue a sheet on top of a sheet and then put a thin layer of wax over it, the paper kind of disappeared and melted together, which I found very beautiful and poetic. So here are a few more of these, and these are mostly printed in intaglio. There's a little bit of some relief prints as well, but they're mostly created through the laser engravings. So for the rest of my time there, I really wanted to focus and see if I could make something more three-dimensional. That tends to always be something I'm striving for. How can I make my work more three-dimensional? And I wasn't trained as a three-dimensional artist, so it's a little bit of a challenge for me. So this is kind of where I got with paper. I wasn't, again, that happy with it. There are certain things I thought were interesting. I liked kind of the way things would layer, the interaction, how you could look at it from different angles and that sort of thing. But it really wasn't quite where I wanted to go yet, so I was still continuing to search. The piece that I had finished there was then shipped off to a show that I was having at the Turchin Art Center, which is in Boone, North Carolina. And here is that installed in front of that window. So there was a flyer hanging up, a poster for my show, and a geology faculty member, Steve Hagman, who also specializes in bryozoans, happened to see it and noticed that my work, he recognized the bryozoans immediately. And he sent me an email and asked me if I'd like to come and work with him because he noticed that I had bryozoans in there, and he wasn't for sure that I even knew that's what they were, but he was super excited to see them. These are very, they're not a very common organism, so these scientists are super excited that someone's showing an interest in them. So I went and we spent the day together. He was extremely generous as well and showed me these plates that he made. They're called fault plates, and I guess what they do is they go out to the location. This particular project that Steve was working on was in Bolivia, and he goes out and puts these fault plates, which look to me a lot like plexiglass, out either in the ocean or right next to it, and leaves them there for a year and then returns and then explores what types of creatures he has collected on them. So I got to spend the whole day using the microscope and exploring them as well, and taking photos. Um, and that was just, I felt like a little kid in a candy store. So fun. So I took probably hundreds of these photos. They're all saved in a database on my computer, and they will certainly become part of a project sometime here in the future. I haven't done anything with them quite yet, but these are all also bryozoans. Around that time, I had to go to Florida because my mom unfortunately broke her hip, and I had to help her. I had been starting to explore lichen also because people were telling me that the stains that I was creating looked extremely similar to lichen. Um, and so as I started researching lichen, I noticed that that was very true. And I was really pleasantly surprised when I went down to Florida And all the palm trees in my mom's neighborhood were covered with lichen. I didn't know that palm trees were that, great a source for them, but apparently they are, especially when she lives, right on the Gulf, right near the water. So when I wasn't helping her during the day, I would be wandering around, stopping at every palm tree and taking close-up images of the lichen that were on there to use in future plates that I would create. So this is just sort of like a little sample of what was on my phone. So back home in my studio here in Kentucky, again, I'm still exploring how I make my work more three-dimensional. So I created this piece called Flow, and I think it's kind of interesting. I do feel like it will be a stronger piece if I build an armature to put behind it. So it had a little bit more structure. So around that time, I was doing a lot of hiking, exploring, and I went to a place called Land Between the Lakes, which is here in Kentucky. And I stumbled upon a massive amount of lotus seed pods, just like thousands of them. It seemed like they were everywhere. I was really interested in the holes, the circles, and how, I felt like that those were kind of related to work I had been using or things I've been doing. So I decided to fill my backpack up with a bunch of them to take them home. Not really knowing what I would do with them, but I figured I could figure out something. I think my initial thought was probably take photos of them and make them into laser engravings. In my studio, I had been doing a lot of cleanup, trying to expand the space for all the projects I've been working on. And there was a bunch of old paint that had been left by previous people that had owned my house before me. And I had taken the lids off so I could let the paint dry out so I could dispose of it. But then my intuition just stopped me and said, you need to dip those seed pods that you collected into the paint. And I was kind of like, why would I do that? But then I have learned that I need to trust my intuition, and whatever crazy, wacky thing it tells me to do, I should just do it because often it leads to somewhere new and interesting. So I started dipping those lotus pods in the paint. Um, but it wasn't very interesting. It was fun. I enjoyed the process, but what happened wasn't that interesting. However, I was remembering previous recent walks and how there are these sweet gums everywhere, which I was really excited about because I didn't grow up with those. So I thought I could go out and collect those as well as magnolia seed pods. Those are something that I didn't grow up with either and something that are quite beautiful. So I just started going outside and collecting things. Well, this image here is sort of the first attempt at dipping those things that I collected into the paint. So here's some, yucca pods. There were some of those in my neighborhood. And then there's sweet gums, which are really fun for me. Also cockaburs. I remember those dearly from being a kid, and getting caught in our dog's hair all the time. So I started dipping those. I also started kind of building little sculptural forms with them, creating bigger pieces and dipping them into the paint and letting it drip off. By submerging these objects in layers of recycled paint, I aimed to draw attention to the issues of pollution and humans' impact on environment. Each layer of paint serves to obscure tiny details, encapsulating the objects in a shell of discarded paint. So I would repeatedly dip them to kind of build up the layers of paint. I also got a grant that allowed me to purchase a massive amount of wax. So that was really exciting, and I started dipping things in the wax. These are some baby magnolia pods. So this image is including both paint and then wax on top of it. So that was my next step. By coating the objects in wax, it symbolizes an effort to preserve natural treasures and highlights the delicate balance between exploration and conservation. So this is my first attempt of doing something with these seed pods that I had been dipping. I made this little installation in my studio. It's also my first time ever really doing something more sculptural. And I thought it was kind of interesting, but again, I felt like it was lacking something, so I wanted to continue my exploration and continuing to do more and more of these activities of dipping. I started experimenting with pouring the paint onto the seed pods, gluing them together, then dipping them again after that. They're getting larger and a little bit more funky. Then I came across these little bell jars and I decided I would start making some little versions, some little sort of sculptures. I was really excited about the idea of making these objects that could be taken home. Most of my stuff tends to be really large, so I thought it would be nice to have these little special precious things that you could have. And I also see these as a way to just really sort of experiment and test things out and play. So I've made a lot. At this point in time, I've probably made several hundred of these. So here's some how I would display them. Okay, so this is a solo show that I had right after my sabbatical called Generative Growth. This is the first time that I feel like I actually brought all the things together. And was really excited about this installation called Abundance. First time I felt like the paper was working, the layering of the paper, the hanging of the paper, as well as all the seed pods together. And then the use of the branches. I'm deeply fascinated by the natural processes of growth, the way plants expand, spread, and occupy space in our environment. While in the studio, I often find myself thinking about this process, allowing it to inform, and guide my creative endeavors. It's an intuitive journey that feels deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. One of the most fulfilling experiences for me is entering a gallery space and allowing my work to unfold and evolve within that space as it wants to, much like a plant flourishing in its natural environment. So part of this installation, I wanted to have a performance piece, and this artist, Megan McKinley, and I had collaborated together. So I asked her if she would be interested in performing, and I wanted to create a wearable piece that she would wear. I also invited a fiber artist that is in our town, Cindy Houston, and asked if she would help make the skirt because that was more of her expertise. So here are some stills of Megan performing in this space. She really brought the work to alive. So one of the things I really love about this piece is how the work can kind of flap and move with the wind as you walk by. And so she was sort of activating it as she was dancing. And I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly because I am running short on time. Here's another detail of this piece. Thorns add a protective, even defensive quality, suggesting nature's resilience and tenacity. They act as a reminder of boundaries and the resilience needed for survival, echoing the tensions between beauty and threat. Together, branches and thorns create contrast of softness and sharpness, embracing a dynamic duality that speaks to themes of identity and the delicate balance within ecosystems paralleling the complex layers of human experience. So these are little pieces on the floor. Back in my studio, I decided I wanted to make these really long pieces. The paper supplier that I was getting my paper from had found these large rolls of paper for me, so I was excited to explore making some big prints. So here I am staining only certain times a year I could do it outside, so I started doing it in the studio too. And this is part of the solo show that I had in Pittsburgh State. And actually, I think you have all these pieces there at your gallery as well. So I had some bamboo hoops in my studio, and one day I decided that I would experiment with them and start gluing some of my prints on the really transparent Kozo paper to the hoops and stretching it across sort of like a drum in the hopes that it would lead me somewhere. I think it's super important with this new direction to acknowledge Jacob Hashimoto's work, which I had been admiring for the last couple years every time I would go to the Nashville airport because he has a new large-scale installation there. Both Hashimoto and I approach our work with a conceptual framework that transcends aesthetics. My explorations of microbiology, chance, and ecological relationships parallel Hashimoto's reflection on cultural narratives and the human experiences, creating layers of meaning. Both of us use modular structure to create large-scale installations. So this is the next show that I had called Ebb and Flow. And this is the first time I started incorporating those circular pieces within the installation. So basically I took the installation that you saw the last one and started incorporating those. But this was a really massive space. So it was a little bit more spread out. So here's some pictures of this piece. I was also really excited about this space because of all the light. The whole side of the gallery is full of windows. And then the next show, actually almost a few months after that, in between there, I made significantly more hoops because I felt like I needed a lot more density. And so this was that show. This is in Nashville. And I decided I was going to focus more on the hoops in this piece and have fewer pieces of paper. Of course, this is a much smaller space than the one in Indiana. So the materials I use, such as this Kozo paper and natural elements, symbolize the fragility and strength of the natural world, paralleling the feminist exploration of underrepresented groups, experiences, and resilience. The transformation of materials through staining, coating, and the interplay with nature can be seen as a metaphor for nurturing and transformative aspects of feminist practice. The deliberate concealment and revelation of natural materials, and in this case, human hair, reflects themes of visibility and invisibility, which are central to feminist discourse. This can be interpreted as a commentary on how underrepresented voices and contributions are often obscured or undervalued in our broader social context. Here's another detail. So this last project really quickly is started at the residency I did in Carson, New Mexico this summer. I brought a bunch of prints with me that were in my flat flower drawer for a long time and not being used. And I decided I was going to make a book. I haven't made many books, but I thought it would be fun to explore. So here, as soon as I arrived, I took the pages, the prints that I was going to use for the book and put them out in the yard and started making stains on top of them. My artistic process, including the meditative rituals of working with natural materials and elements of chance, aligns with feminist practice that value personal and collective experiences, intuition, and the process over the final product. This reflects a feminist ethos that values nonlinear, experimental, and inclusive approaches to art and life. Again, not in the studio. This is Ghost Ranch. Spending a lot of time out in nature. Georgia O'Keeffe. It's pretty obvious why she fell in love with this part of the country. It's just breathtaking. So I set up my little studio outside. I brought all the scraps that I had while I was making all of those circle panels, and as well as these old prints. And I started collaging things together and also doing a lot of drawing on top of them. And then this I actually just finished like last week, this book, and it's a accordion book. These are just some quick pictures of it in my studio. I haven't actually had time to professionally document it yet. And I really see this piece as kind of just sort of like a visual exploration of the experience that I had, and sort of appreciation and kind of meditative walk through the landscape. And I showed this presentation to my students, and they told me what it was missing was more pictures of my dogs. So here you have Juniper and Petunia, my sweet little Boston Terriers. So thank you very much. And please follow me on Instagram so that you can see more of the work as it unfolds. And I'd love to answer questions.
Do we have time for some questions?
Yes.
You at the beginning of your presentation, you talked about John Cage's work and chants. You mentioned that several times. And I was
Yes.
curious how much that plays in the installation of your work, because I enjoyed really putting it together and just kind of speak about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So Coretta,
One of your works upside down, I noticed. Oh.
oh, one of the pieces. That's okay. So very much like I don't come up with a plan. I really love to go into the space and sort of just allow things to unfold and try to take out that thought process because the critical mind, at least my critical mind, is way too critical. And if I rely on it to make decisions, artistic decisions, about stuff like that, then it becomes really boring. So I really like the work to kind of, I just start hanging it up and then go from there. I will stop and, think about formal things. I am a bit of a closet formalist as well, but I definitely like the chance to be a play in it. And I think in the creation of the work, I'll have all those plates, so I'll have maybe, 30, 40 plates that I'm working with in a day of printing. And they're all in they're the shape of the, what's on the plate. So I'll just ink them all up and then I'll kind of just sort of randomly place them. And then that's where it's really about chance. Um, and I definitely try to set up these sort of working processes so that I don't have to think because I feel like it gets in the way of creativity. Coretta Kent, who was John Cage's teacher, had that list of rules. And then one of the rules was creating and thinking should not be at the same time. So you like think over here and you create over there, and then whatever you're doing, the creating, you shouldn't be like analyzing. I think the rule is technically not analyzing at the same time. And I firmly believe that. I think that gets in the way of so much. Hopefully that answered the question.
I have a question too. So you talk about your interest in the relationship between natural processes and your process. But you use digital engraving, so you do a digital process for creating the prints. Do you see a relationship between how digital technology kind of informs how it creates images and natural processes?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. That I haven't been asked. So I actually, I'm really not a fan of
Okay.
technology.
Yeah.
I, I would much rather do everything analog. And in this situation, I really wanted to represent the way that the photos looked. And the easiest way that I discovered was through creating the laser engravings. But having that technology added on there was something that I really was hesitant about using. Just because I tend to think of them as being pretty different. But I think, the laser, it does go in with that sort of relinquishing control factor, because the laser graver is taking over. But I don't know. I have to think about that more. Um, do you have any thoughts on it?
I just thought that your images are made up of tiny little cells. And
Yeah.
so digital information is tiny little cells
Yeah.
of information. Yeah.
Totally. That's true. Yeah. And I know that I was surprised at how much I enjoyed making just sort of doing that cut and paste in Photoshop and creating the images that I would make in there. So that's kind of like they're tiny little cells that I'm building up to create the larger image. And that's kind of everything is a module. Like I feel like all the things. One of my friends was making fun of me because I just recently had that foot surgery and I was making without knowing it, I started making modular food. Because I was trying to prepare. So I had bought these little kind of like giant ice cube trays, and then I was putting food in those that then they would become these sort of modular things that I would have to eat. So I think that's sort of how I think of my whole entire life is this sort of these modules that kind of build to make this bigger thing. Um, that's a little bit random, but
And can you explain what Kozo paper is? Because I don't think everybody knows what's familiar with.
the Kozo paper that I use is it's really transparent. It's very thin, but it's also super strong because the Eastern papers are made with really long fibers versus a Western paper that's a really short fiber. And so part of what I love about this particular Kozo paper that's really thin is that it appears very translucent, or sorry, it's very translucent. It also appears very fragile, yet at the same time, it's super strong. It's way stronger. It's like kind of actually hard to tear. So I feel like it's a really good sort of representation of our planet and how, our planet is actually quite strong. It's been put through an awful lot and, it only holds so much, but it's also at the same time very fragile. So that's kind of my interest in the Kozo paper.
Any other questions?
Good question. So you talk about like, just how, like you just mentioned, how the paper kind of relates a little bit to how you see Earth. Obviously your work deals a lot with like, biology and, cells and everything like that. So out of curiosity, would you say that growing up, you always had like a fascination with that? That you were always interested in? Did you randomly pick that up one day as you were going through art school? Where did you pick that up and like when did that become a turning point for your art?
Good question. When I was a child, I spent a lot of time out in nature, and wandering around and like observing things. And I think it was a bit of an escape, too, because my home life wasn't great. So nature was very protective and a very loving environment for me, and I felt really at home. And I think still to this day, when I'm out on a trail, being surrounded by nature, it just feels very peaceful, and it's such a wonderful retreat from the rest of the world, especially with all the craziness going on in it. That definitely has been ongoing for sure. I started working with the cells and the cancer. That was actually where I started with the biology. And I was living in a place in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, and it was right by this Centralia, Pennsylvania, which is there's this underground fire in a coal mine that's been on fire since the 70s. It's a very historic place, and there was a so like everything is deserted there, and I noticed it. So we were like 15 minutes from it, and there were a lot of people with cancer in that area. So it seemed like a pretty obvious correlation to me that, we lived 15 minutes from this fire that had been burning for, however many years that is. So I became a little paranoid about cancer. And I started looking at a lot of cells, of cancer cells, and noticing that beauty and kind of thinking about that kind of, what does it mean? It's very beautiful, yet it's destructive, and how it's so invasive. So that was kind of the start. And then not that long after that, my father died of cancer. So then it took on a whole nother realm. So quite a while. I'd say so that work started in maybe 2000 and let's see, I think I took that job in 2006. So it was not that long after that. So I've been working with some sort of biology for quite a while.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll
Thank
send
you.
you a recording tomorrow.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you listening to me and freezing. Hopefully you enjoy the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.